My God, Bones. What have I done?
What you had to do. What you always do. Turn death into a fighting chance to live.
Bridge to all decks. Time for a brand new episode of Enterprise Incidents with Scott and Steve. I'm Scott Nance.
And I'm Steve Morris. And is this the first two-parter of Enterprise Incidents?
Well, it is.
Actually, it is not, because
right?
we did the menagerie in two parts. That's right.
Well, how appropriate that we're doing our second two-parter in Enterprise Incidents history with the guest who joined us on our two-part deep dive on the menagerie, Johnny Rocha. Welcome back aboard Enterprise Incidents.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me back on. Listen, it's kind of funny that I'm on here for the multiple parts. Maybe it's because I'm long-winded, but I enjoy having these conversations with you guys, and I'm so glad to be back on board the bridge to have a fun conversation about Star Trek 3 and pick up from where we left off.
Well, you are the third host of Enterprise Incidents next to our great friend Ralph Sinetsky. So it is a talk about, being a great company. So yes, this is our second part of our deep dive on Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, a very special two-part episode of Enterprise Incidents to coincide with the 40th anniversary of the release of The Search for Spock, which was on June 1st, 1984. And where we left off was the big meeting between Saavik and Kirk, where Kirk vows to save not only his friend Spock, but his friend McCoy. His words at the end of part one of Enterprise Incidents was, I swear. And that tough, scaled back, understated, restrained, but powerful swear from Kirk means, he means business. And I think that we chose that part to end it because that's kind of the midpoint, that we are picking up. And from this point forward, I think the whole tone of the movie changes from one that's somber to one that gets a little more lively and a little more fun. Is that fair to say, Steve Morris?
I 100% agree. And something we talked about throughout the original series was Star Trek's ability to have multiple tones within the same episode. We talked about it with The Naked Time. We talked about it with
a Metamorphosis shifted tones.
Metamorphosis absolutely has a shift in tone. Right now we're back at the Genesis planet where Saavik and David have beamed down. They find the coffin and they find a bunch of little creatures running around in the coffin.
There are your life forms. These were microbes on the tube surface. We shot them here from Enterprise. They were fruitful and multiplied.
But how could they have evolved so quickly?
And there is a reaction to that.
David Marcus, Kirk's son, has a guilty look on his face, which will pay off very, very soon.
We see Spock's burial robes, but we do not see Spock's body. There's another earthquake, and we hear a scream in the distance.
Even after watching this movie many times, there are certain scenes that still kind of have an effect on me. Of course, one of them being in Spock's quarters when Kirk goes down after the Enterprise gets back to Spacedock and he hears Spock's voice. This is another one where you hear the scream. I mean, you know who it is, but it's still pretty good in terms of getting a feeling, striking an emotion, because the movie is called The Search for Spock, right, Johnny?
Yeah. It's jarring for sure. I mean, look, those bugs and whatever. I didn't catch David's guilt until like maybe the 6th or 7th time I watched the film, because I just was like so focused on these weird creatures. And if you've ever been in a situation where you've stumbled upon weird, ugly insects, you're just like, oh, it scars you, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
sure.
seeing that moment is pretty scarring. But then hearing Spock's screams, that's really jarring as well. The film, sometimes people overlook this film, but there's an incredible amount of darkness in this movie, and the journey that they're going on here, there's a real undercurrent of pain and anger and frustration and sadness and loss that is echo. It's almost like it's almost like a recovery from the loss of Spock. So now we're going through this, dealing with the grief and the pain and anger. And so, yeah, when you hear that, it's pretty jarring to hear his young screams there as the planet is, reacting to him,
And another moment where you hear not necessarily dialogue, but you certainly hear a voice before you see whose voice it is.
And we've talked about this technique both on Enterprise Incidents and on the Cinephiles, the screenwriting technique, which is called enter late, leave early. This next scene is a perfect example because we come in right in the middle of the scene with the Admiral saying,
"No, absolutely not, Jim. You're my best officer. But I am Commander, Starfleet, so I don't break rules."
Don't quote rules to me. I'm talking about loyalty and sacrifice. One man who's died for us. Another with deep emotional problems.
what I love about this makes me think of, I don't know about you, Scott, but it makes me think of a mock time, where Kirk has to fight with the Admiral to get to save Spock,
Absolutely. That's a great point. That's a great connection. And right on point. Only in this case, Kirk is trying much, much harder because in a mock time, Spock was still with us and now he's not. And McCoy wasn't even affected, but now he is. So the stakes are the personal stakes for Kirk are very, very high, and he will pay not one but two prices.
I like this next moment because the Admiral says,
"Now, wait a minute. This business about Spock and McCoy. Honestly, I never understood Vulcan mysticism."
You don't have to believe. I'm not even sure that I believe. But if there's even a chance that Spock has an eternal soul, then it's my responsibility.
Well, it's great. So what do you think? I think it's great to tie this back to a mock time, but I think the way this scene plays out, especially when Morrow says to Kirk, he says, if you're becoming obsessed, paraphrasing, if you don't let this go, it'll destroy you. Do you hear what I'm saying? Okay, while Morrow is saying all of this, Kirk Shatner looks away from Morrow, and the camera zooms in on him slowly. What is Kirk thinking at this moment while Morrow is saying all of this? I mean, I don't know what Shatner is thinking, but I think I know what Kirk is thinking. Any ideas, Steve?
Oh, I have ideas. Yes, absolutely. I think this is Kirk over and over again. I mean, this is him stalling for more time during the Galileo 7. He's always going to push everything to the end of the envelope. And the dark side of it is in an episode like Obsession or like Conscience of the King is that he's not going to let anybody stop him ever,
Right,
if he believes that he's right.
At this moment, when Morrow was telling him, you'll destroy yourself, I think Kirk is thinking, well, wait just a minute here. Look what we're talking about. Look who we're talking about. We're talking about a friend who put everything on the line while I was trapped in the inner space of the Tholian web. We're talking about someone who put everything on the line and hijacked the Enterprise to save his former captain.
Oh, sure.
He's, going back to the menagerie, John. I mean, like this movie definitely, not initially when I first saw it, but there came a time, I guess a few years later, when you just have Star Trek percolating in your brain, and you're trying to connect the dots and, do all this like fan, headcanon, so to speak, that like, look what Spock did for Kirk and for Pike, and now Kirk is in that same position, and he's like, well, of course, I'm, going to do what I have to do, regardless of whether I'm following orders or not. But that's what I think what's going through his head at this moment.
I have a couple of thoughts when I look at this and I look at his face now, because I'm remembering the scenes. Obviously, I just watched it to get ready for our show, and I'm just looking at his face, and I remember, like, I was like looking, what is he thinking? And I wonder, because Morrow is basically saying, as you said, Scott, his career is on the line here. And I think you're right. Like, he's thinking about Spock, but I wonder if, and I just caught this time, I wonder if he's thinking about his place in the Federation. And this, because look, as we get older as men, we know this, the three of us know this, we question sometimes being part of organizations. We question sometimes the things we got into bright-eyed and wide-eyed and, utopian approach, idealistic approach. And then as we get older, we realize, no, there's some flaws here. Do I still want to be part of this organization? And as Morrow is talking to him, I see Kirk like contemplating, can I live in a world where I'm not part of the Federation? Is it worth it to risk this to save my friend? I don't know. So I like considering that he's thinking of all those things, plus thinking about how many times Spock has saved him and how the Federation doesn't understand this. And having Morrow say, I've never really understood the Vulcan thing.
Yeah.
And it's so insensitive.
Yeah,
This idea that you're the Federation of Planets and you're accepting all species and everyone's equal and the utopian vision. That's what they say for the press. But behind the scenes here at this bar, Morrow is saying, I've never bothered to even give it, to try to understand it or give it any kind of, it's insulting. So I just wonder if Kirk is questioning his membership in the Federation.
Well, I think at this point too, I think Kirk has already made up his mind.
Yeah, well, 100%. So, which leads me to a question back to you two, as Star Trek experts as you are. Why does Kirk always try to ask permission when he knows they're never going to say yes to him? Because there's never been documented in anything where Kirk has gotten a yes. I don't think for any kind of extreme decision that he's wanted to make.
Well, I think that's a great question, but I think he is going to. He's going to ask, even though he's already made up his mind that he's going to do what he wants to, whether he's allowed to or not.
Yeah. I'm so glad you made this point, John. I had never thought about this moment as being that, but A, I think you're 100% right. And B, I think it connects to a whole bunch of stuff that we've been talking about with Kirk's character, which is that in Wrath of Khan, he's stuck and unhappy because he gave up being a starship captain.
Right.
This movie, Scott, as you said, is going to have this huge change of tone from somber to really fun adventure. And that change of tone is literally happening in the next scene. Like it's happening right now at this moment. And what you just made me think, John, is that I think what Kirk has realized is it's not that his destiny is to be part of Starfleet. His destiny is to be the captain of the ship on the adventure. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
That's his destiny. And in this moment of him going, okay, I tried to do it within the Starfleet rules.
Yeah.
And now I'm not going to do it that way. I think he's happy. I think you know what I mean? And that's why we have this change of tone. Kirk, even though it's a serious thing and he's, his friends are in trouble, he's having fun from this point forward in the movie. Obviously there's a tragedy that's going to happen down the line, but this is fun for him.
It's a great point. That's a great point, Steve. It's like, okay, at this moment, as soon as he's made up his mind, it's like he's back in action. It's like this is his purpose. No matter where he does it, whether it's on the Enterprise or in the next adventure on a captured Klingon vessel, he is even when he for a split second has thoughts about taking over the Enterprise B in Generations, like this is, you're right. This is the moment where he just goes, okay, I'm back. It all happens in a split second, but it reinvigorates his purpose.
Yeah. He even has the little classic trickster moment at the end where he kind of shrugs and smiles and says, I had to try.
Yeah, I hear you. I had to try.
And the moment he does that, we're like, we know where this is going. Goes outside. There's Sulu and Chekhov.
The word, sir?
The word is no. I am therefore going anyway.
You can count on our help, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sulu. I'll need it.
And you're just like, there he is. Yeah. There's Captain Kirk. Then we cut to what I will describe as Star Trek's version of a den of scum and villainy. Because it is clearly like the cantina in Star Wars, but Star Trek-y.
Right, yeah. Because you got a tribble in it.
Yeah, there's a tribble. There's people playing video games with like 3D biplane things. And in comes McCoy.
Long time, Doc.
Yeah,
What'll it be?
Altair water.
That's not your usual poison.
To expect one to order poison on a bar is not logical.
I love D. Kelly's delivery. It's like he can't believe these words are coming out of his mouth.
Yeah. Right.
And then we see this dude with some really interesting ears and lips and facial features.
I here am new, but you are known being McCoy from Enterprise.
You have me at a disadvantage, sir.
My name not important. You seek I. Message received. Available ship stands by.
It's not Yoda backwards speaking. It's a different one.
Yeah.
But I like him. I like him a lot.
How much and how soon? How soon is now. How much is where?
And I'm like, this is Han Solo, you know?
Yeah.
This is totally that.
Somewhere in the Mutara sector. Oh, Mutara restricted. Take permits many. Money more.
When he says somewhere in the Mutara sector, my mind immediately flashed back to the Battle of the Mutara Nebula in Wrath of Khan, which is definitely one of the best staged space sequences, I think, in film history. I just think it's up there with, like, the asteroid chase in Empire Strikes Back. It is just, I mean, it's run silent, run deep, and in space, really, but it is so good. And I immediately went back there when he goes somewhere in the Mutara sector.
And this is where I think this is such a good job giving each of our characters their moments, because I think McCoy shines in this scene.
There aren't going to be any damn permits. How can you get a permit to do a damn illegal thing? Look, price you name, money I got. Place you name, money I name, otherwise bargain no.
Bargain no.
And he says it's Genesis, and he says it loud.
Yeah.
And people turn around.
Yes, Genesis. How can you be deaf with ears like that?
Yeah.
I find this movie fun. I'm having a good time in this movie.
Yeah, and it's, again, another alien that he just can't help but notice his ears.
Yeah, exactly. And the guy tries to get away because this is forbidden.
Look, backwards friend. Genesis may be planet forbidden, but I'm damn well.
And then there's a hand on his shoulder that sits him down rather forcibly.
Sir, I'm sorry, but your voice is carrying. I don't think you want to be discussing this subject in public.
I'll discuss what I like.
I want to say two things here. First of all, the actor who's playing that alien who's speaking kind of backwards, that's Barney Berman, who is a makeup designer. He did the Tom Cruise makeup for Les Grossman in Tropic Thunder.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
He also did makeup on Galaxy Quest, and he has worked all the way up until now. He is credited as a makeup artist for that This Is Me Now Jennifer Lopez video, which came out just a few months ago. So this is a guy who's consistently worked both as an actor under prosthetics and as someone who has created prosthetics and designed prosthetics and done makeup for a number of movies, including Galaxy Quest, who Scott has officially dubbed one of the unofficial installments in the Star Trek universe. So this is a guy, he does a wonderful job here. It's such a great,
amazing. What trivia.
Yeah. And the waitress, by the way, is Dean Kane's mom. So another little bit of trivia there, which I did some research on as I was getting ready for this conversation.
Very nice.
That's why you're the official third host of Enterprise Insights. There you go.
Could I offer you a ride home, Dr. McCoy?
Where's the logic in offering me a ride home, you idiot? If I wanted a ride home, would I be trying to charter a space flight?
I love the melded, like, it's irascible McCoy with this little irritating touch of Spock that won't quite let go of him. And this guy says Federation security, and he flashes a badge. And what does McCoy try to do, Scott?
Tries to give him the FSNP, famous Spock neck pinch, and it just doesn't work. But DeForest Kelley, his performance in this film, I think, is absolutely one of the standouts of his time on Star Trek, because he's not just playing McCoy, he's also playing Spock, sometimes both at the same time.
Yeah.
And, when you have a moment like this, compare it to the moment later in the film, after they, spoiler alert, have Spock's body, he says, I miss you. Like, everyone has moments or a moment or moments to shine in this movie, which is another reason why I think Star Trek 3 doesn't get the credit that it deserves.
We're back on Genesis, and we see snow falling on cacti. And you start to go like, I think think there's something messed up about this planet. We report up to Grissom that they've found a second life form. And of course, the captain says, proceed with caution, Saavik, because he is a cautious guy.
I like the tone of his voice. He goes, proceed with caution, Saavik. And then it cuts back to him and he goes, what the hell's going on down there?
We're in some sort of a jail and we hear,
make it quick, Admiral. They are moving him to the Federation funny farm.
Yes, poor friend. I hear he's fruity as a nutcake.
which I wrote down, classic Kirk. This is him in piece of the action of just like, I'm playing up whatever it is that you need me to play up. Goes inside, says, how many fingers do I have up? And shows him the Vulcan salute.
well, just so you know, William Shatner has never been able to do the Vulcan salute.
Oh.
So if you look at his hand closely, because they never actually show him putting his hand to the camera, he kind of holds it back a little bit. You'll notice that his last two fingers are rubber banded together.
That's funny.
Because he could not, to this day, he does not know how to do the Vulcan salute. Some people just can't do it.
And McCoy goes, that's not very damn funny. And
but that is funny.
but it is funny. And he gives him a shot.
You're suffering from a Vulcan mind meld, Doctor.
This is McCoy's line. There's so many lines I love.
That green-blooded son of a bitch. It's his revenge for all those arguments he lost.
When he said that, I will never forget the unanimous amount of laughter and applause in the theater. Yeah. And I will also, whenever I hear that line, when he says it's revenge for all those arguments he lost, I think back in a split second to all those arguments Spock lost and all the arguments that McCoy lost.
Yep.
Because their relationship was just as crucial to the success of the original series as the relationship between Kirk and Spock. I think it's very different, but still just as important.
Totally. And then Sulu comes in looking for Admiral Kirk, wearing some weird leather jacket but it's in strips. It's like half leather jacket, half cape, half poncho. It's very odd. And the guy yawns.
Keeping you busy?
And this guy doesn't like that joke, and he stands up, and he's like a giant, and looks down at Sulu and says,
don't get smart, Tiny.
You know who didn't like that joke?
Oh, George Takei.
George Takei did not like that joke.
What?
He did not like that joke.
Oh, wow.
But when he saw the way the joke played out in theaters during the premiere and that everyone laughed at this next moment, then he went, okay, I like that joke.
The guy comes in looking for Kirk, and Kirk, goes, this man's sick. And it's a classic Star Trek thing we've done over and over again, except in this case, he doesn't even really wait for the guy to look away at McCoy. He just hits him right away. And then we go back outside. Sulu has the giant guy in the arm bar. Sulu flips him with a beautiful flip and says,
don't call me Tiny.
The moment they're breaking their friend out of jail. Like, remember in A Taste of Armageddon, when Spock had to use the Vulcan mind meld to get the guard to open the door, and of course he did it again and by any other name. I love moments like that, and that definitely felt like a TOS moment for sure.
The actor there, Gary Fega, he was an airlock technician in the motion picture, Star Trek: The Motion Picture. So,
the airlock technician. You're right. He was the guy. Wait, he was the guy who Spock gave the neck pinch to get the spacesuit to go into V'ger.
So you would think, as he's been promoted, that he would be aware of what this Enterprise crew can do, but no, he gets flipped by Sulu there. As his job as prison guard. There's got to be a whole backstory with this guy and like the terrible things that are done to him by the Enterprise crew.
You know what? It was funny. So when we did the original series, there's very few callbacks to other episodes. There are a couple of mentions here and there that mention little things. When we moved on to the animated series, we found a lot more. They were much more willing to reference older episodes.
Right.
And certainly there are some small references in Motion Picture and in Wrath of Khan. But here in this movie, they seem to have really embraced like understanding of what the past is and understanding the joy that we who love the series get by these little references. And because when Kirk in the next scene gets on his communicator and says,
Unit 2, this is Unit 1. The Kobayashi Maru has set sail for the Promised Land.
I wrote, love it all. I love,
Yeah.
it's just the fact that they use Kobayashi Maru, just all these little things. And yes, this is fan service. And this is something that I've come to complain about a lot in our current world of movies. But for Star Trek 3, I was loving every little bit of it.
Yeah. I think the reason, that's a really great point. And I think the reason it works in Star Trek 3 is because it's a little subtle. It doesn't beat you over the head. But also, I think that's one of the reasons why Search for Spock works so well as a look to the past and a look to the future. Because this is a movie that bridges 2 and 4. And even though 4 looks to the future by going to the past, I mean, it's really, interesting how this Genesis trilogy, as these 3 movies have come to be known as, really, really work.
We are on board the Excelsior meeting Captain Styles. John, my guess is that this is an actor that you like.
Yeah. Yeah. I really enjoy when you get, again, one of these actors that comes in who is just has that kind of character actor energy, but has this kind of authoritarian energy as well. You always appreciate that, because we talk about, like, when you're coming onto a set with a crew that's already been working for so long, or a crew of actors that have been working together for so long, it's tough to stand out. And I think he holds his own throughout every scene that he's in. It's hilarious to watch him in this.
Okay, but so Captain Styles, played by James B. Sickey. Okay. Yeah. Very familiar, of course, for playing Lieutenant Howard Hunter on 144 episodes of the absolute classic 80s series Hill Street Blues.
Yeah.
He was also on TV, going way back with Perry Mason and Mission Impossible. He was also in films, feature films like Capricorn 1. I love that movie. That's Ordinary good. People, Outland, The Pelican Brief, and Fever Pitch. But here's my question, fellas.
Ooh.
Is Captain Styles the same character of Styles from Balance of Terror, that bigoted, temperamental navigator?
No,
I think it is.
So. You think it is? Because this guy this guy puts off this aura of upper class and elegant and above it all, kind of like a lord. You know what I mean? Like, he's like someone that's how he thinks of himself. Whereas Styles,
absolutely. You see him, he's like following his nails, but look, you're talking about almost 20 years. People change, people evolve, and maybe he really, really learned his lesson, because let's face it, if it wasn't for Spock, he'd be a dead man.
I think it's an interesting idea. He sees Scotty, who's heading to the turbo lift.
Calling it a night?
Yes, sir.
Turning in myself. Looking forward to breaking some of Enterprise's speed records tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
And I love Scotty when he's alone.
Level, please.
Transporter room.
Thank you.
Up your shaft.
I love how protective and loyal Scotty is, not just to his captain, but to his ship. Yep. He's so loyal to the Enterprise. It is a through line starting with, when he, wants to stay behind, not do Excelsior, to supervise the refit of Enterprise, and, just being the miracle worker, and, multiplying his estimates by a factor of 4. He loves this ship. I mean, he was through the refit, the redesign, in the motion picture. He really, really went through the ringer in Wrath of Khan. So it doesn't matter how evolved starships have become, how they've gotten bigger and faster with transwarp drive. He loves the Enterprise just as much as Kirk does, but just a little different.
We are at Old City Station. It's 2200 hours, and there's Uhura, and she's with this young officer.
Mr. Adventure, as he has come to be known as, is played by Scott McGinnis. He was in TV shows like The Facts of Life and Murder, She Wrote. And he was in movies like Secret Admirer and You Can't Hurry Love. And I love this scene, guys. How about you?
Absolutely. Well, this is what, I mean, they're really giving stuff. Uhura, who we said over and over again is the most underutilized character in the original series, this is her moment. I mean, this is such a great one. Captain Adventure says,
You amaze me, Commander.
Oh, how is that?
A 20-year space veteran, yet you choose the worst duty station in town. I mean, look at this place. This is the hind end of space.
Peace and quiet appeals to me, Lieutenant.
and then this monologue, which is how he gets his name.
Yeah, well, maybe that's okay for someone like you, whose career is winding down.
The way he says, yeah, whose career is winding down, and the look on Uhura's face is just priceless.
But me, I need some challenge in my life, some adventure, maybe even just a surprise or two.
Well, you know what they say, Lieutenant. Be careful what you wish for. You may get it.
And in comes Kirk, Sulu, and McCoy.
Good evening, Commander. Is everything ready?
Step into my parlor, gentlemen.
Well, this is not what Captain Adventure expected.
Well, what are we going to do about it?
I'm not going to do anything about it. You're going to sit in the closet.
The closet? What, have you lost all your sense of reality?
And then she turns around. She swings around with the phaser and just...
This is fantasy. You wanted Adventure House this. The old adrenaline going, huh? Good boy. Now get in the closet.
Oh, just the way she's like, sort of like wiggling the phaser, and Scott McGinnis plays this really, really great too. He's trying to maintain his composure, but he's scared shitless. It's excellent.
So we put him in the closet.
I'm glad you're on our side.
Can you handle that?
Oh, I'll have Mr. Adventure eating out of my hand, sir.
Here's the thing about, after 3 seasons of the original series, however much they interacted during the animated series, of course, seeing each other over those previous years at some conventions here and there. But the sort of sense of ownership that these actors feel to the characters, like when I was saying how George Takei didn't really like the scene, "Don't Call Me Tiny," but then he grew to love it when he saw how the fans reacted to it. Well, when Nichelle Nichols read the script for Star Trek III, she was not happy about how little Uhura was going to be in the film. But then she got to this scene, and certainly she got to filming the scene. And even though she doesn't have a whole lot of screen time in Star Trek III, she loves what she did with that screen time. This scene is excellent. It kicks the tone of the playfulness of the camaraderie between the Star Trek family up a notch. And Nichelle Nichols is just magnificent in it.
Yeah.
And she looked great.
And then this next moment, and what it made me think of is Uhura at City on the Edge of Forever. Because it's just a beautiful, sensitive moment where she says,
And I'll see all of you at the rendezvous. Oh, and Admiral, all my hopes.
Yeah.
I never made that connection, but you're right. Captain, oh my God, that's right. What is she saying, Sitting in the Edge of Forever?
I don't remember what the exact line is, but it's something like this.
Yeah. She in Star Trek 3, she says, all my hopes. Happiness at least, sir, is what she says in
That's what she says.
Wow.
Well, and you know what it is too, is McCoy is crazy in City on the Edge of Forever. And we have to go on a journey to rescue him. And this is a similar thing in a way.
Right. McCoy's a little crazy. By the way, why did she just go with them?
I don't know. I have the same thought.
I'm sure she did when she read the script.
Yes,
right.
exactly.
Mr. Adventure's in the closet. She could just beam up with these guys, and be like, see you later. I'm out of here. I'm going with my friends.
So we beam up, and I think I said it earlier, but of all the costumes that I hate in this movie, Chekhov's weird pink, it's horrible.
Listen, man, it's the 80s, Steve.
Dude, look, there's plenty of their fine that costume is like it's like if you've been in lots of plays, John, where I'm sure you had to wear some weird costumes. That's where you just go like, what are you talking about? Why would what are you putting me in here? But anyway, we hear, as promised, she's all yours, sir, and we see the Enterprise light up. Scotty's there working on stuff.
As promised, she's all yours, sir. All systems automated and ready. A chimpanzee and 2 trainees could run her.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. I'll try not to take that personally.
So Scotty hasn't slept in like a week, right? Like working on these during the day.
My friends, I can't ask you to go any further. Dr. McCoy and I have to do this. The rest of you do not.
Admiral, we're losing precious time.
What course, please, Admiral? Mr. Scott?
I'd be grateful, Admiral, if you'd give the word.
Another way to tie this film to the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And this scene made me think, I mean, of course, the scene I'm thinking about was much more dramatic, and Shatner's delivery in it was far more passionate. But risk is our business.
Yeah.
It just a great moment. Just, gentlemen, may the wind be at our backs. I love quoting this line. I've quoted it many times over the years. Even when we had said we were going to move forward and do this podcast, I said, "May the wind be at our backs." It's such a and just as he says, "Stations, please." You like everybody like falls back into their roles with confidence, and at that moment, that sort of twinkle in the score by James Horner, where you hear the classic Star Trek music fanfare, and the scene where they steal the Enterprise, which is where we are at now, is not only my favorite scene in The Search for Spock, it is one of my favorite scenes in any of the Star Trek movies. The reason for that is because watching the Enterprise get the crap kicked out of it in Wrath of Khan, and then limping back to Spacedock in the beginning of Star Trek 3. And now the Enterprise is on its last leg, and just like Spock sacrificed himself to save the Enterprise in Star Trek 2, the Enterprise is about to return the favor. It is literally going to go out in a blaze of glory. This scene just gets me. It's a mixture of, excitement, of nostalgia. It is uplifting and also foreboding, because by this point, because of all the commercials that ran on TV back in 1984 leading up to the release of this film, calling it the last voyage of the Starship Enterprise, we knew what was coming. And that's what makes this scene like, okay, I've got just one last breath and I'm giving it to you guys.
It's just so much fun. It's so thrilling. But I will say, I never have this thought that you just said about knowing where it's going. I'm not thinking that at this moment. And of course, it was perfectly reasonable, particularly when I've seen the movie dozens of times, that I should, but I'm not. I'm just going, yay, we're off on our adventure. The ship starts moving. Starfleet starts calling and saying, surrender the Enterprise. They don't reply. We're on the Excelsior, and a yellow alert happens, and Styles calls up to the bridge.
Bridge, this is the captain. How can you have a yellow alert in Spacedock?
Sir, someone is stealing the Enterprise.
And he grabs his riding crop as he heads off.
But the look on his face, like when it's, sir, someone is stealing the Enterprise. And then he just like has this look like, what? All right, I'm on my way.
But we do have a problem, which is that the doors are closed. The Excelsior is starting up, and we hear
status.
All automates ready and functioning. Automatic moorings retracted. All speeds available through transwarp drive.
Incredible machine.
I love his arrogance, and I love that we get these two contrasting captains to Kirk. We have the uber cautious captain of the Grissom, and we have the super arrogant captain of the Excelsior,
Well, both of these guys are probably a step ahead of where, let's say, Commodore Decker was in the Doomsday Machine, or Captain Ron Tracy of the Exeter. These guys are definitely off their rockers.
Which again, going back, John, to your original point, is none of these guys are like Kirk. Like what Kirk doesn't, Kirk is his own thing.
Well, I think that's what helps here, because it takes all kinds to become captains. There isn't one way. Right. And there's a reason there's not TV shows about Grissom and the other guy because they're not as interesting. It's the captains who are challenged consistently, breaking rules where they think the rules can be broken, but also adhering to the rules when they need to adhere to them, and finding their way out of situations. We love Captain, we love characters that live by the seat of their pants, or when they're thrown for a loop, find a way to get back to that level position. And so Kirk has always been that. That's, and this is one of the reasons why I love him. I'll always love him over Picard, and I love Picard, and Picard certainly has been caught with his pants down a couple times, or a few times rather, in the series and in the movies. But there's just something about Kirk that I just feel more organically connected to, because he seems like a street level guy. Like he's going to figure it out and he'll do whatever he has to do. Whereas Picard is more cerebral, which I think is such a benefit as well. It's just personal preference. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I love that.
It's great that you had just two completely different Enterprise captains who are so polar opposites, really, in their approach, but just as iconic for different reasons. And I love when the Enterprise is pulling away, the janitor in the the lounge, and he's all by himself and he's like looking at the Enterprise again with that big gash on the side of the secondary hull. This is not the Enterprise at the top of its game. It is on life support.
Yeah. And back on the Enterprise, Kirk says, "And now, Mr. Scott." "Sir?" "The doors, Mr. Scott." "Hi, sir.
I'm working on it.
But they're staying close because we have to get a little closer, I love there's a great reaction shot of Sulu as they're real close.
Yeah.
And by the way, just the way that the Enterprise keeps approaching the space doors, little by little, there's that one shot of you see the warp nacelles inching closer and closer to the doors, and then the doors open and there's the musical fanfare, ta-da! And then you hear Sulu say,
"We have cleared space doors."
Da, 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 da. The Enterprise is backing out, and you're just going like, I just remember everybody in the theater was going, woohoo!
The Excelsior is following.
He tries to get away with warp drive. He's really in for a shock.
So we're setting up that the old, broken, beaten up Enterprise is going to have to somehow go toe to toe with the top of the line, most advanced ship in the world. The Enterprise comes around. I think all this stuff looks great. We're closing in on it.
"Kirk, you do this, you'll never sit in the captain's chair again."
Warp speed.
And off goes the Enterprise. And then we're on the Excelsior, which has this thing we've heard about called transwarp drive that Sulu was really excited about. We hear prepare for transwarp drive. And then everyone on the bridge, the arms of their seats fold down almost like seatbelts. Like this idea of like, wait, we could be more secure and not just get thrown around like happened on the Enterprise. That seems pretty smart. And he says, "Okay, we hear transwarp at your command, full power available." He says, "Execute." We hear the engine starting up this big build. It's going to be super exciting. And then it starts to break down and the computer scrambles and fuzzes out. And it says, "Good morning, Captain." And then we hear,
"Transwarp drive, maximum velocity in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And then they use the full car breaking down sounds.
It chunks to a complete stop.
Yep.
And then the very next cut is the Enterprise at warp speed.
Scotty, as good as your word.
Aye, sir. The more they overthink the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain. Here, Doctor. Souvenirs from one surgeon to another. I took them out of her main transwarp computer drive.
And he drops parts in his hands. I think Scotty has so many great moments, in this run, in this movie. It's a lot of fun.
Scotty in this film reminded me of probably one of his finest hours in TOS, and that is the Doomsday Machine.
Oh, yeah.
The way he was always prepared. I mean, he's going to not be prepared in just a few moments, but up to this point, to single-handedly take a starship that it takes 420 people to operate in and do it with just a few people. For the most part, he really succeeded, and he passed with flying colors. And I love McCoy. He goes, "Nice of you to tell me in advance."
That's what
Kirk
you get
says,
for missing staff
"That's
meetings."
what you get for missing staff meetings, Doctor."
I think that's hilarious. And I think Kirk's next line is hilarious.
"Gentlemen, your work today has been outstanding. I intend to recommend you all for promotion in whatever fleet we end up serving.
And the way Sulu was like, "Yep, ain't that the truth?"
So we're back. We're heading off towards Genesis. And speaking of Genesis, we're back there. It's a snowstorm. We hear cries, and they come across a naked young person that we know must be Spock, shivering in the cold. And I just love the detail that she puts the cloak. Saavik puts the cloak on him, and then we pull back the hair to reveal the ear. Great reaction from David.
So we have the first of 4 different Spocks here. As Spock ages along with the Genesis planet, he's played by a different actor in each scene. So this first one is played by Carl Steven, and then the next one is played by Vadia Potenza. Then the next one is played by Stephen Manley, and then the final one before we get to Leonard Nimoy is played by Joe Davis.
We have found the life sign. It is a Vulcan child, perhaps 8 to 10 Earth years of age.
A child?
How did he get there? It is Dr. Marcus's opinion that the Genesis effect has in some way regenerated Captain Spock.
The delivery that Robin Curtis does, that it's somehow, and she pauses, Captain Spock, and then the look that the navigator gives Captain Esteban, like what? Are you out of your mind? Like she looks like this long blink, and then like a crazy she out of her mind.
Yeah.
I think Captain Esteban has a lot of imposter syndrome. He definitely he's sitting there going, man, maybe I shouldn't be the captain on the bridge. And the moment where he goes,
Saavik, that's extraordinary. What would you like to do next?
And they talk about beaming aboard. And we, try to figure out if there's any reason to be worried about that.
All the same, I'm going to advise Starfleet and get instructions.
I'm sure Starfleet would approve, sir.
And if he hadn't wanted to ask Starfleet, Spock is dead because they would have beamed him up right away and then get blown up by the Klingons.
Oh, maybe.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. You're right.
Because in the next moment, there's an energy surge, and suddenly there's the bird of prey. The captain gives orders to target the engine only. And they fire, and they missed. And by missing, I mean they destroyed the ship. The Grissom.
My bad.
He goes, I wanted prisoners. A lucky shot, sir. And Krug kills him. And a lot of this is in subtitled Klingon, by the way. And he says, sir, one of the other crew members says, sir, may I suggest, say the wrong thing, Torg. And then we switch to English. And it's an odd, I think they're trying to do like the Hunt for Red October sort of moment where we just magically switch to English, but it doesn't quite work as well.
If it's prisoners you want, there are life signs on the planet. Perhaps the very scientists you seek.
Back on the planet, and Saavik is kind of comparing faces with young Spock.
It would seem that Grissom was destroyed by an enemy attack. We must go. They will soon come after us.
And so David picks up the kid, and we head off on the Enterprise. We hear we're 2.9 hours away from Genesis. And Kirk asks, scan for vessels in pursuit. And we hear Spock's voice say,
scanning. Indications negative at this time.
And we look up, and McCoy is at the science station.
Did I get it right?
I love the look on Kirk and Scotty's faces. They're like, yeah, great bones. Just great.
Time for total truth between us. This planet is not what you intended or hoped for, is it?
Not exactly.
And this is where David reveals that he used proto-matter in the Genesis Matrix. Which is basically, he cheated. The only way he could make this work was by using this unstable substance.
Well, it's very interesting how both father and son try to cheat the no-win scenariio. One of them was more successful at it than the other. Because David, a lot of people died because of this. First of all, look what happened to the Reliance crew. Look what happened to Khan's crew. I mean, of course, you could argue they deserved it. But look what's going to happen, moving forward over something that didn't work, but that everybody was after because it didn't work, which made it more of a weapon than anything else.
I mean, it certainly will work for the Klingons for
Right.
what they want it for.
Yep.
So let me ask you. First of all, I love this scene in the movie. This is like arguably it's my favorite scene without the main crew members in it, right? Because there's some real back and forth that resonates at a time where we're in the middle of the Cold War, right? When this film comes out, nuclear
right.
war is a possibility when this film comes out. So this idea of someone cutting a corner to create a weapon that will destroy people,
Yeah.
but the cutting of the corner could actually blow up in their faces. So this actually is a conversation as you're watching this that resonates with audiences back then. I remember resonating with me when I saw this film back then and being like, oh wow, David. But I've got to ask you guys, in the world of Star Trek though, do you like this idea that they put this on David as part of his storyline before he is murdered by the Klingons? Here is David. Yeah, and she calls him out for it, Saavik does, just like your father, cutting the corners or taking the chances, and then calls him out and said, but many people died, So now you put this burden on David because we just spent an entire second movie sympathizing with David, caring about David, and and David gives Kirk some closure at the end of the movie. So we like David, we love David, but now we're going to make David irresponsible with the Genesis. So I just wonder what you guys think now looking back on the movie. Did you like that as an element of the story? Did it serve a purpose, I guess, is the question.
It definitely served the purpose. The purpose is yet to come.
Right. Fair point, because the weapon is unstable. Right.
But, that moment that you're referring to at the end of Wrath of Khan, when David goes to see his father.
Yeah.
And he's, they're talking about you never have faced to death. And Kirk's a mess. He's like, I have poured myself a drink. Would you like it? And then he just goes, I'm proud, very proud to be your son.
Right.
And Kirk hugs him like, he's never hugged anyone like this before. It's his son. It's probably the first time he ever hugged him in his life. And now you shifted to a new film where you are making David responsible and also inadequate with what his job is, and even just to be in Starfleet. He was ignorant and he was weak, which is not his father.
Yeah. And I don't understand, because wouldn't you think that's the moment at the end of Wrath of Khan where he would say to him, there were good words. And so now that he's repaired this relationship to a degree, wouldn't that be the moment to sit down and go, Dad, I got to tell you something about the Genesis machine, because this is super important.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hey, Dad. But you know what? At the same time, John, maybe
fair point.
He just didn't know, like right at that moment, Genesis planet was looking pretty nice.
Yeah, maybe I got away with it. That's a great point. Maybe I don't have to tell anybody my secrets. I hadn't thought of it that way. That's a good point. Yeah.
So I'm really happy you asked this question, John, because this has actually always bugged me. I've always, in fact, all of what they do with David in this movie, I love the actor, and I think he was a much more interesting and powerful character in Wrath of Khan than he is here. And I don't think it's fair to say all these people died because of David. I mean, the reason that Khan killed all the people on Regular One was, because he saw the stuff that what's the Reliant, and he found out that information. That has nothing to do with proto-matter.
Well, that's a good point. Yep.
Like there's and so like saying like all these people died because of David, that's just not fair. And I have always, I thought he was a really cool character, and this is less cool. But what I will say is that it gave me another epiphany this moment, because in the way they handle David in this film, because in part one, there's the line that I really struck me this time where Kirk says, I feel like I left the best part of myself on Genesis. And that we talked about how, to some sense, Spock and McCoy, they're what make Kirk great. Without them, he can't be who he would be. And I think without them, he's David Marcus, because he would rush in. All the times that Kirk was ready to rush in could have been disasters that Spock and McCoy prevented him from doing, and that David Marcus didn't have a Spock and McCoy.
Excellent point. Yeah, you're right. Wow. Like if David Marcus had his version of a Spock and McCoy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Right.
Well, and you know what else David didn't have in his life? Kirk.
Yeah.
He didn't have a dad. Right. You know? And obviously there are all sorts of single moms who are the most amazing people in the world. I don't mean to make any kind of statement.
How dare you?
But I do want to say, like, you know, it's so funny. Like, you don't want to think too much about David Marcus because a part of me goes like, where the fuck have you been, Jim? You know, like in this kid's life. I know that Carol said she wanted him in his world, but you were an absentee dad for this kid's whole life, you know?
I wanted him in mine.
Yeah. Anyway, the Klingons land, they find the coffin, and you remember those little tiny creatures that were on the coffin? They're not little tiny creatures anymore.
They're pretty big.
Yeah. And Kirk kills one of them, and I like they call down, and he says, "Bridge, nothing happening here." After he was like wrestling with this crazy creature.
This planet's aging in surges.
And Spock with it. It seems they're joined together.
They are.
How long?
Days, maybe hours.
And then Saavik brings up what she knows is going to happen next, which is that it's going to be the hardest on Spock because of Pon Farr.
Vulcan males must endure it every 7th year of their adult life.
And again, this is everyone who's a Star Trek fan is going, oh no, I know what this is. I know where we're heading.
You know, Steve, you're so right. I never realized just how much this film does embrace Star Trek's past.
Yeah.
But everything about it, it feels so organic. Like it never, even then, 40 years ago, I never felt like the canon took me out of the film. The fan service took me out of I think when fan service takes you out of a film or a TV show that you're watching, that's when it's a problem. But when it fits into the story organically, then it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate this, is that we realize that someone's coming, they're getting closer.
I'll go.
No. I'll do it. Give me your phaser.
And I'm like, she's in Starfleet.
Yeah.
You're a scientist. Why are you? There's like this weird gallantry, like I'm the guy, so I should go off and fight the Klingons. It's like you're totally incompetent to fight the Klingons.
Yeah, right.
You remember how your dad took you out with like one punch when he first met him,
Where's Dr. Marcus? Oh, Dr. Marcus.
On the Enterprise, we're calling for Grissom without getting a response.
How are we doing?
U.S.S. Enterprise calling.
Are we doing?
Respond, please.
Funny you should put it quite that way, Jim. We are doing fine. But I'd feel safer giving him one of my kidneys than what's scrambled in my brain.
I think that was the first time I've watched this movie since I gave my brother a kidney.
Oh, wow.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, I was like, whoa, okay. It's amazing how movies, take on different meanings as you get older and wiser.
Scott, do you know, believe it or not, I literally told my son about you giving your brother a kidney yesterday.
Really?
Oh, that's awesome. That's so sweet you do that, Steve. It's not easy to do that when, reveal that about someone. And then that's a powerful move, man, to talk about that with your son. Maybe that's a little bit of an example, to show the kind of.
Oh, it definitely. Well, that's what we were talking about. It's one of the most generous things you can do. And it's also because, and John, maybe you know this, but Karen, my ex, only has one kidney. She was only born with one kidney.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So we were talking about that. And anyway.
Yes.
You're a good man, Scotty Brown.
Thank you, brother.
You are, definitely. Saavik hears groans. We look over, and there is an older Spock, and she says, in Vulcan, "So it has come." I think the way they handle this is really great, that she holds out her fingers. And again, it's the two fingers thing that we saw in Journey to Babel, So, like, there are all these little references, and he kind of copies what she's doing, and he eventually grabs her hand, and there's an intense look, and then we cut away. What exactly happened after we cut away?
Okay, so first of all, this scene is so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so sensitive. It's so effective. And the music that's playing during the scene is the music that we hear in Spock's quarters when Kirk goes to see him in Wrath of Khan and says, "Hey, we have a problem with Regular One," and then Spock, ends that conversation with, "I have been and always shall be your friend." That's the music you're hearing. But what if, James Horner tapped into the motif or the music cues of the Pon Farr during Amok Time? The music that was playing when Spock was telling Kirk about Pon Farr in his quarters. Now, I think that music was much more dramatic and alien, whereas the music here is much more sensitive and I think fits the scene much, much better. But that would have been pretty cool, I think, for us fans to hear the music cue from Wrath of Khan. But I still love the music that he uses.
But no, you have not answered my question.
Oh, okay.
What
I was getting to your answer.
Away?
I was getting to your answer. So remember how I told you I rode my bike to the bookstore and I bought the novel for Wrath of Khan, and I went straight to the back? Well, you know what, Steve? I also flipped back a little bit. And that's not the only thing that happened here.
Oh.
In the novel, Saavik is pregnant.
Ah, yes. With Spock's child.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only possibility. They have to have sex because that's what we understand is that he has to take a mate or die.
Right.
So the only way to say, and I think, I think it's a beautiful thought and purely logical. Like, this is what has to be done to save Spock's life, and therefore I will do what has to be done.
Yeah.
I like it.
The payoff for this moment actually happens not in Star Trek 3, but in Star Trek 4, when the bounty, the Klingon ship is about to take off, and Saavik says her goodbyes to Captain Spock, and it's awkward.
Yeah, there's a look.
There's
a definite moment there. We're on the Enterprise, which is arriving at Genesis. The Klingons see them coming and they cloak.
I swear there was something there, sir.
What did you see?
For an instant, a scout-class vessel.
We're back with Spock, who is asleep, and the camera pans to Saavik, and then there are the Klingons who grab them because David did a terrible job protecting them.
Yeah.
I've come a long way for the power of Genesis. And what do I find? A weakling human, a Vulcan boy, and a woman.
My lord, we are survivors of a doomed expedition. This planet will destroy itself in hours. The Genesis experiment is a failure.
And again, we go to this idea of the different ways we're viewing this, because for the Federation, this is a way to create life and build a planet and all these constructive things. And for them, it's a weapon.
The most powerful destructive force ever created.
And then on the planet, we hear over the communicators Kirk's voice.
Grissom, this is Enterprise calling. Please come in.
I love the smile on David's face when he hears his father's voice.
I do too. It's such a great little moment. It's this distorted, Grissom, this is the Enterprise calling. And like David just has this like smile, like, of course, like there he is, right. The cavalry is right over the hill and like, of course he's here. But you know what I mean? Like what else would he be thinking, Johnny?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And of course, Dad found me. Of course. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
well,
of course.
And what's so sad about it to me is that he went from resenting and not trusting his dad because his dad was part of the military and he was a scientist and he thought that his dad would take Genesis and be part of all, to by the end of Wrath of Khan, loving his father and seeing him as this tremendous hero.
Yeah.
And now in this moment, he's like, there he is. He's this hero. He's going to save us all. Except he's not going to save you, David.
Yeah.
That's what's so sad.
Yeah.
So you know what it is? Is like you talking about, Scott, the moment where seeing the Enterprise go on its last mission, knowing that it's going to be destroyed, and that's where you're sad. That's this moment for me.
Yeah.
Is seeing that look of relief on David's face and knowing he's going to die. Krug is up on the Klingon bird of prey. They're closing in on the Enterprise. They start to see the distortion. And this is where I go, man, come on, Kirk. Like, we should put up our shields, sooner than this, if they work.
Opinion, Mr. Silver.
I think it's an energy surge.
Enough energy to hide a ship, would you say?
A cloaking device.
Red alert, Mr. Scott.
Hey, Tom.
The lead up to the attack on the Enterprise from the Reliant in Star Trek II is excellent.
Yes.
Just the music is great that goes along with it. You know, this moment of building intensity as, you know, Kirk's trying to figure out what's going on. And then, you know, he's always one step behind. But now Kirk is one step ahead because he's like getting ready to fire, knowing that they have to decloak in order for them to fire. So whereas Kirk like was off his game at this particular moment in Wrath of Khan, now he's on his game in the search for Spock. The moment when the Klingon bird of prey decloaks, sonically, it's great. You hear every bit of that decloaking. You know, when you see the form of the bird of prey take up the entire screen.
Klingon bird of prey, sir. She's arming torpedoes. Fire, Mr. Scott.
2 photon torpedoes fire from the midsection of the Enterprise there. Bird of prey goes, you know, off its course, and then all hell's breaking loose on the bird of prey, and Krug's pet dies from an explosion. And the music fanfare during this moment is really great, but well, now you pissed off Krug, and you know, now it's going to go from good to bad mighty fast.
And what I think what the big problem is and I love that you're contrasting this with Wrath of Khan, because in Wrath of Khan the ship was in great shape and Kirk missed it. And here, Kirk is on the ball, but the ship can't handle it.
Sir, the shield's non-responsive.
Scotty, the automation system's overloaded. I didn't expect to take us into combat, you know.
And just at the moment, you know, you again, I have this vivid memory of watching this play out on the big screen. You know, watching, and you know, the bird of prey is holding its position. The Enterprise is drifting. And, you know, again, you see the big fat bandage on the side of the Enterprise. I mean, she is really on her last leg here. I mean, like really, truly on life support. And she has one last breath in her, and Kirk is going to use it.
Why haven't they finished us? They outgunned me 10-1.
My lord, the enemy commander wishes a truce to confer.
Put him on screen.
Kirk comes on screen, which I like that they recognize him as the Genesis commander. And he says,
Your presence here is an act of war. You have 2 minutes to surrender your crew and your vessel.
so Kirk does what he always does. He bluffs, you know. When he's weak, he pretends to be strong.
What did you think about it this moment, Steve?
I didn't think about it, but since you've asked me the question, then I will have to say that obviously you thought about the Corbomite maneuver.
That is why, you know, we are doing this conversation, because that was one of the first conversations we had on Enterprise Incidents, because after The Cage and after Where No Man Has Gone Before, Corbomite Maneuver was the very first episode of Star Trek filmed when Star Trek went to series in 1966. Kirk is bluffing. Doesn't have the Enterprise doesn't have it, and certainly he doesn't have it in him to pull off a bluff like the Corbomite maneuver, but Kirk is still bluffing.
Well, and I like that. I think it's always so important to build up your bad guy, because Krug sees through it.
Yeah,
you know, he says he's hiding something, and so Krug comes back at him and says,
Admiral Kirk, this is your opponent speaking. Do not lecture me about treaty violations. The Federation, in creating an ultimate weapon, has become a gang of intergalactic criminals.
Smoking like a true terrorist. Smoking like a true terrorist. Or freedom fighter, depending on your perspective. Yeah.
He says, it's not I who will surrender, it's you. And then he tells them that he's got 3 prisoners on the planet below, and that he will execute them one at a time as enemies of galactic peace. And then we get on the communicator.
Admiral, this is Lieutenant Saavik.
Is David with you?
Yes, he is. And someone else, a Vulcan scientist of your acquaintance.
And Shatner here at this moment is great. I think Shatner's performance in Search for Spock does not get enough credit. like, and look, he was terrific in Wrath of Khan.
Yep.
But the Khan scream, in Wrath of Khan it's over the top, but it's also iconic. I get it. But the moment when he says, yes, and a Vulcan boy of your acquaintance, and Kirk drops his guard.
Yeah.
He drops his guard. This is the reason he's here. And he's like, his delivery, this Vulcan, he's like, is he alive? Oh my God. I just think that Shatner just crushed. He was terrific here.
Hello, sir. It's David.
I'm sorry I'm late.
It's okay. I should have known you'd come.
Which, I love that.
Yeah.
And then he says,
Saavik's right. This planet is unstable. It's going to destroy itself in a matter of hours.
David, what went wrong?
The honesty and the vulnerability of this confession.
I went wrong.
I don't understand.
This is why I'm just frustrated with David in this movie, because he's so dumb in so many ways, and this is another dumb moment. He says,
I'm sorry, sir. Just don't surrender. Genesis doesn't work. I can't believe they'd kill us for it.
And it's like, dude, you were not listening.
Admiral, your young friend is mistaken. I meant what I said. And now to show that my intentions are sincere, I shall kill one of the prisoners.
And I think we're thinking, okay, Kirk's got to do something. He's going to make some move, say something, make some deal, because we have none of these three people can be killed. That's my feeling when I saw the movie the first time, is that you can't kill any of these people. And Klingon grabs a big knife, points it at Saavik, at David, at Spock. And I love that Spock has zero reaction because he has no idea what's going on. You know?
Right. He's out of it.
And he moves behind Saavik, and it's like, oh, he's going to kill Saavik. And he snaps that blade open, and then David goes and attacks him.
Well, David clearly doesn't have the fighting skills of his father.
No.
No.
And it does not take long for David to be overpowered by the Klingon warrior.
Yeah.
And even though it's sort of obscured, the thrust of the knife into David is shocking.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
So we've been talking to this point about the way that David is depicted in The Search for Spock. And between Leonard Nimoy as a director and Hart Bennett as a producer and writer, there was a lot of debate at this moment about who was going to be killed, whether it was Saavik or David. And ultimately, it was decided that David should die as punishment for using protomatter in the Genesis Matrix. That this was sadly a comeuppance of sort, a consequence of his recklessness. I don't think it's fair.
I don't like.
Yeah. It's a brutal way for him to be just, sort of a target in this film. Because I like David.
I have very mixed feelings about this, because I like David too. I think that reasoning would never be the reasoning I would use in something that I was writing. Like, that I just and particularly because the protomatter thing seems like a thing that they invented in order to get to service the movie, not so much because of David's character.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't like David dying. I do like that he tries to be heroic in his last moment. I do like that. I don't think David dying is necessarily the right thing for this movie in a weird way, but I love Shatner's performance in the next moment.
Yeah.
It's one of the great Shatner moments in all of Star Trek, I think.
Again, I remember seeing this in the theater like you guys did, I think. And I just kept thinking it was such a swerve, right? Because the whole time you're thinking, no, Kirk's going to figure this out. Like, no way his son dies. And this is still Star Trek, for God's sakes. We up the ante, we up the stakes. And even though Spock just died, well, I'm in a movie where they're bringing him back. So clearly this doesn't happen in Star Trek, right? And then the moment happens. And I just remember being shocked, right?
Yeah.
I didn't care about protomatter or anything. Like, I cared that David, who I'd grown to love in Star Trek II Wrath of Khan, which I had seen multiple times by the time I saw this one.
Sure.
Is killed in this manner. And you say, Steve, we don't see the thrust, but we see him rear up
Yeah.
And so we know that it's a death blow. And it is shocking. And it's all the more shocking because Nimoy shoots it in such a smart way. We can just see above the hedges or the grass or whatever, the vegetation, but we can't see enough to see the David reaction. So in a way, we as the audience are even more frustrated to watch David's death because we can't actually watch the whole of David's death. So it adds to the feeling of despondency that he's taken away in such a way. We're kept at a distance from the death of David, which is on purpose, I think, in a way, so that we feel the pain and anger, and we are Kirk because Kirk's on a starship listening to his son die. So in a way, as the audience, we are now bonded to Kirk even more so because we just went through the same experience in our seats as Kirk did on his ship. And I think it's, although I hear you all's reasonings and I totally agree, you know, it wasn't built up that well and whatever, but like when it happens, it's still shattering.
Oh, it is totally.
Right?
Well, that's
As
what I
a
say.
Star Trek fan, you know?
Yeah. And the fact that Kirk listened and heard someone die. You know what I mean?
And the way he says, Saavik, and then he goes, David, like in a softer voice.
Yeah.
And I think Robin Curtis, her delivery, her flat delivery of the next line is great.
Yes, agreed. As a Vulcan, it's a perfect delivery.
Admiral, David is dead.
The reaction from Kirk, he takes a step back, going for the chair, and stumbles and falls before he can get there. I think is so brilliant and vulnerable. And then he says in a soft voice,
Klingon bastard, you killed my son. Oh. Klingon bastard, you killed my son.
The way he repeats the realization, you know, the first like is in disbelief. You Klingon bastard, you killed my son. And then it hits and immediately overpowers Kirk in a way that we've not seen him this vulnerable since he lost Edith Keeler in City on the Edge of Forever.
Bruh, I was just going to mention that. I was just going to say that these two deaths are comparable because Kirk can do nothing about it. It is the no-win situation, right? He has faced the no-win situation. That's the kind of hidden truth that he hasn't, but he has. The Edith Keeler was that. He couldn't do it. He couldn't save her.
The no-win scenario that he could not cheat and win.
Yep.
Well, I mean, honestly, he couldn't save his brother, his brother's wife, or his nephew. He couldn't save Miramani. I mean, like, there's as we said many, many times, he is a tragic figure.
Yes, a lot of loss. Yep.
There are 2 more prisoners, Admiral. Do you want them killed too? Surrender your vessel.
All right, damn you. All right. Give me a minute to inform my crew.
I really like Christopher Lloyd in this, and I like the way he says,
I give 2 minutes for you and your gallant crew.
But he's saying you win to buy some time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it takes a minute, and he's like just composing himself. Yeah. And then he just turns around.
Mr. Sulu, what is the crew complement of a bird of prey?
About a dozen officers and men.
I'm making a weird comparison, but like John McClane, like Rocky Balboa, James Tiberius Kirk doesn't have quit in him.
Yeah.
Right.
He's always, no matter how hard he gets knocked down, he is going to get back up. And I like the sort of give me a minute because he hasn't gotten back up yet. You know what I mean? Like he does need to take a moment to get his head straight to fight back.
So I want to say something about the reaction here that is so brilliant. And I might cry talking about this because I love Kirk. Like, Kirk's my boy. Like, when he goes through stuff, I go through stuff, right? And I think the three of us have that in common with Shatner's performance as James Tiberius Kirk. And when real emotion comes out of Shatner in these moments, you can't help but be moved because you love the character so much. And there's a reaction here that he has to the death that is so powerful because he looks to his left lost, right? Like, who can help me? No one can help me. And then stumbles. And as he stumbles, he's stumbling because he can't find the energy to lift his foot over the step to get to the seat. And so the stumble is not just my losing my footing. The stumble is I don't even have the strength to lift my leg 3 inches or 4 inches to get to the step to fall into the chair. And Nimoy does a great job by the camera of moving the camera from above him, just slightly above him rather, to down where he falls. And he becomes a child, physical child. Now we know the death of his father, right? What is the I don't know. But he regresses to a childhood position, lost. All this energy is sapped out of him. And where I might get emotional is that when you pan to McCoy, and I don't know if you guys have caught this, he is slightly raising his one eyebrow, like Spock might. So I think Spock's energy in McCoy is watching Kirk navigate this as well. And so where Bones would probably run, right, to Jim and do whatever. Jim, Spock that is still inside Bones doesn't run to him because that's not his nature, but you see him reacting with the eyebrow up and down as if he's registering what Kirk is going through. And Scotty, who is an older man now, James Doohan, the look on his face, and Lord knows what James Doohan has seen, there's so much sympathetic pain with him watching not only William Shatner, but his captain as the character, right? And so the death here is so good. The reaction is so good. It isn't obviously him and Spock because there's so much here, but it's good enough that you just feel that. So that when and you said, Steve, so well, when he says, when he shoots up, that's Kirk, right? I'm not out. I'm still standing, you son of a bitch. You hit me with all you got and I'm still standing. And so piece by piece, as you said, he puts himself back together so that when Torg makes the stupidest fucking mistake to give him 2 minutes instead of 1, he has essentially signed his death warrant, right? And so, because we just saw one of the greatest guys in Khan get outsmarted by Kirk. And so by giving him extra time, it's like football. You don't give Tom Brady 2 minutes. You don't give Patrick Mahomes 2 minutes. You don't give Joe Montana 2 minutes. You don't give great quarterbacks 2 minutes because 2 minutes is all they need to beat you. And that's what we see here from Shatner as he puts himself back together as Kirk to find a way to save the other 2 innocent people and his friend from dying all over again at his hands, So such a beautiful scene, man. It really is. And the blue light is perfect for that death to put you in that death vibe and atmosphere as well.
Yeah, to frame McCoy's reaction as if it's not just McCoy who was observing Kirk's sacrifice.
Yeah.
But Spock. That they're both reacting in real time.
Yeah.
To this shocking turn of events. Especially because this is all in the name of saving Spock.
Yeah.
Yep. Wow.
His Katra is reacting, so to speak.
Yep, the Katra is reacting.
I swear to you, we're not finished yet.
Okay, let's figure this out. Let's just look at this for a second. In a space of just maybe a minute or two, Kirk goes from having the rug pulled out from under him. His son has been killed to getting to the point where he says, I swear to you, we're not finished yet.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of recomposure that only someone like Kirk could bring.
Computer. This is Admiral James T. Kirk. Request security access. Computer. Destruct sequence 1. Code 1. 1A.
The look on Scotty and Chekhov, especially Scotty, he's like shocked. But of course, right here, you have a very, very big throwback of continuity to the original series, because we're about to hear the destruct sequence that was used in Let That Be Your Last Battlefield.
I remember, Scott, you would ask me many times, do you remember the first time you saw this episode? And the answer was always no. I can remember being in the movie theater. I remember when those words came out of his mouth. And and like you're reeling from the death of David and from this unbelievable, vulnerable and powerful performance from Kirk. Yeah. And then he says this, and I go, holy crap.
He's
Oh
going
my
there.
God, I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and it's such a great thing because those who are the serious trekkers in this moment are all ahead.
Mhm.
And then the rest of the audience doesn't quite know exactly what's going on. And the thing too is like in Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, we knew obviously the Enterprise wasn't going to be destroyed.
Right.
And here we know it is going to has to destroy to save the day. Kirk has to destroy the thing he loves the most in the world.
Yeah.
This is his true love. Because, and it gets me emotional thinking about it, because even though we've always said the true love is the Enterprise, but the real true love is the people.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, a lot about this moment. Again, when I saw this film at the Orleans Theater on June 1st, 1984, I think in some ways this affected me more than when Spock died. Because I knew Spock was going to come back. My dad told me, and he was right. But I mean, how do you bring back this Enterprise? And again, you know, the destruct sequence, you know, hearing it, you know, certainly, oh, that's from Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. How cool. But there's no coming back from this one.
Code 000. Destruct. 0.
Destruct sequence is activated.
And then you see Kirk and Scotty and Chekhov race off the bridge and, you know, down to the transporter room. It's such a great scene. The scene is so fantastic, so well executed, the build up to it. And the shift in tones in this film, going from the somberness for the first almost half hour to the vibrancy and the rousing feeling and the playfulness when they break McCoy out and they steal the Enterprise. Now things are pretty damn serious.
Yeah,
we've already lost Kirk's son. Now we're going to lose. We're going to lose Kirk's ship. We're going to lose the Enterprise. Yeah. And this made me think back to The Naked Time when he said, "Never lose you."
Yep.
Never.
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
And they beam off the ship, and the Klingons beam in, and there's nobody there. And they go through the red halls, and there's nobody there. And the music, I think, is great in this sequence.
My lord, the ship appears to be deserted.
How can that be? They're hiding.
Yes, sir. But the bridge seems to be run by computer. It is the only thing speaking.
Speaking? Let me hear.
And we hear 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. I love Corey get up and goes, "Get out! Get out of there! Get out!" 1. And then the Enterprise explodes.
Okay, but the way it explodes, it doesn't just explode. It explodes piece by piece in such a dramatic fashion. Like the death of the Enterprise is more dramatic than sometimes main characters in other films or TV shows because the stages in which it dies. First, you have the absolute nerve center of the Enterprise. The bridge is the first to go, and it explodes into a million pieces in spectacular fashion. Then the Enterprise starts to tumble out of its orbit, and then the camera zooms in to this iconic image of the Enterprise that we've seen over and over again, going back to basically the man trap, the first episode that anyone ever saw of Star Trek. That's the primary hull. U.S.S. Enterprise, NCC 1701. And it slowly disintegrates. The words USS Enterprise disintegrate this character that we have loved as much as Kirk and Spock and McCoy and the rest is dying before our eyes. The words USS Enterprise, the primary hull, disintegrating until that too explodes in a spectacular fashion, tumbling the Enterprise into the atmosphere of the Genesis planet where it starts to burn up. And the next scene shows the Enterprise burning up in the atmosphere with its top crew members looking up. It is so sad. It is so sad because I think when I think of the Enterprise in Star Trek 3 especially, I think more than anywhere else, even in the episodes, the Enterprise felt like a character unto itself. I think in Wrath of Khan, absolutely it did.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the great things about the way the Enterprise was depicted with the original series and Next Gen, but certainly with the original series movies, is the Enterprise was a character. It was a character, and this character in the search for Spock is dying. It's dying.
Yeah.
But you know what? Instead of like just going and becoming a museum and put it to mothballs, she goes out literally in a blaze of glory. She goes out doing the noblest act that a starship could do, which is saving its crew, and in effect, saving Spock.
Yeah.
Which brings me back to the point that in Star Trek II, Spock died saving the Enterprise, and here we see the Enterprise returning the favor. The Enterprise was a living Enterprise, right, Johnny? Like it's Trek 2, Spock died saving the Enterprise. In Star Trek 3, the Enterprise, like, I owe you one. Return the favor.
It's funny. I everything you say is absolutely right. I've never really felt sad at this moment. And I think it's funny. It's something I really discovered. I already kind of knew this, but I really discovered it when you and I were doing the show, Scott, is that it's the different kinds of geeks, and that there were some who like, I remember when we had Dave Rossi and the excitement about when he would talk about, seeing another Constellation class ship or seeing each one of those things and how excited he was to get the technical specs or things like that. And that was never my geekness. I was never I love the Enterprise, of course, but I love the characters. And so to me, because this is such a valiant death, you know what I mean? Like it's such a beautiful death. And it's heroic. It's such a heroic moment that I was never sad. I was always, I shouldn't say I'm not sad at all because I love the Enterprise, but it's just like, it was kind of still like a yes moment. And then the next moment with McCoy, and this is what McCoy is there for all the way back to Balance of Terror. We have these moments with McCoy where Kirk expresses some vulnerability and McCoy has exactly the right thing to say.
My God, Bones. What have I done?
What you had to do. What you always do. Turn death into a fighting chance to live.
And that, Steve Morris, is exactly what I thought of at this moment.
Balance of Terror.
Watching Star Trek 3 for the first time in many, many years, certainly since we did our epic dive on the original series, at that moment when McCoy says, what you had to do, what you always do, turn death into a fighting chance to live, I thought of Balance of Terror, Don't Destroy the One Named Kirk. I thought of The Ultimate Computer.
Yeah.
To James Kirk, Captain of the Enterprise. I mean, these are the moments where, you've got the Kirk and Spock relationship, you've got the Spock and McCoy dysfunctional relationship, and then you've got the Kirk McCoy relationship, which is different from the other two, and this was right in character for everyone at this moment, including the Enterprise.
Yeah, I think this is the greatest shot of the movie, watching them on the ledge as the Enterprise goes down. And Charles Crowe was the cinematographer, so maybe he set up this shot with them in the way in the background. They're just kind of standing small, watching this ship go down. And I couldn't help but notice this time around as I'm watching it that it's like the crew of a sea vessel watching their sea vessel sink from underwater.
Yeah.
And the visual of that, and the captain, and then the exchange with McCoy is so powerful. Just so for those like Scott and me to an extent, who were sad to watch this happen to this iconic ship, we understand the reasoning. And so McCoy's not only talking to Kirk, he's talking to us. Like, hey, I know this is sad, but he did what he had to do and turned
Save
death
us.
into a fighting chance to live. So trust me, we've got you. We're going to figure this out, you know? And so I love that. This whole sequence is so great.
Amazingly, that this destruction of the Enterprise was not featured in some of the earlier drafts of the film.
Oh,
It was only added later when they were kind of wrapping up the screenplay that Hart Bennett and Leonard Nimoy realized we need a life or death dramatic situation, and they just didn't feel that the death of David was big enough. Well, they went pretty big, didn't they?
Yes, they
sure did. We're on the planet. There's earthquakes, and the planet is not doing well. We're over with the Klingons. Spock is in pain and screaming, and he runs off grabbing his face. And Saavik goes to try to help him. One of the Klingons goes to grab Spock, who tosses him like ragdoll.
Yeah.
And then we get, we grab Spock and see his face, and you can literally see his face changing right in front of us.
Yeah. It's the American Werewolf in London moment.
Yeah, sure.
Kirk and the crew run up, and now he shoots a Klingon with a phaser that sends the guy flying, something we've never seen a phaser able to do before. And I love, while McCoy goes to examine Spock, Kirk goes to David's body and takes off his coat. And there's just this moment of silence and looking at this, and he says,
"What happened?"
He gave his life to save us.
It's such a, if you put yourself into Kirk's head at this moment, when he's kneeling down, like first he heard the death, then he heard that it was him, and now he's seeing his body. After he watched the body of his beloved Enterprise, go down in a blaze of glory. Yep. It's a lot to process. Yep. But all the while, all this fire is going on the set around them. And at one point, the fire got a little out of control, or I should say a lot out of control, and it turned into a full-blown fire on the set, on the Paramount set of Star Trek III. So one of the first people to jump up and use a hose to try to put the fire out was William Shatner. So while you might be thinking, oh, that is such a Kirk thing for Shatner to do, to try and put the fire out on the set, Shatner was thinking, if this fire gets out of control and destroys more of the set, then production is going to be delayed, and I'll miss my start date for the next season of T.J. Hooker.
Rapid aging. All genetic functions highly accelerated. What about his mind? His mind's a boy. It seems, Admiral, that I've got all his marbles.
And what we realize is what we got to do is get him off the planet. And there's fire everywhere, as you said, and ground is collapsing. So Kirk gets on his communicator and says,
"Klingon Commander, this is Admiral James T. Kirk. I'm alive and well on the planet's surface."
Which very much mirrors what he does with Khan. When it's very similar to, "You'll have to come down here and get me."
Yep.
Khan, you bloodsucker.
Like a bloodsucker.
Says,
Do you?
You keep missing the target.
But our ship was the victim of an unfortunate accident. Sorry about your crew, but as we say on Earth, c'est la vie.
I think it's because of David and because of everything else. There's just this bit of acid in Kirk's voice, in his sense of humor at this moment. And there's more shaking and Spock's screaming, and then there's the transporter, and there is Captain Grood with his disruptor pointed at them.
Drop all weapons!
He gives most of the prisoners' coordinates, and Kirk says,
"You should take the Vulcan too."
No!
But why?
Because you wish it.
Because you wish it. It's so great.
And then he yells in Klingon,
"Look! Joy-chu!"
And everybody except Kirk, Spock, and Krug are beamed away.
Genesis! I want it!
Beam the Vulcan up, and we'll talk.
Give me what I want, and I'll consider it.
I really like Krug. I like Christopher Lloyd a lot. I think it's I think he's great in the role.
Yeah, he's great. I think he's great, for sure. Yep.
You fool, look around you! The planet's destroying itself!
Yes, exhilarating, isn't it?
This is where I like him the most. As I said, to me, he grows on me as the film goes along. This is the moments where I really see a great Klingon come to the forefront.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Well, and this is, again, slowly establishing who the Klingons are. And I think this is another moment that really works for where the Klingons are going to go, which is...
If we don't help each other, we'll die here.
Perfect. Then that's the way it shall be.
Because it's a good day to die.
Right. That's right. And you know what? For the moment, only a fool bites in a burning house.
Yep. The quake hits, and suddenly this rock lifts up, and he falls on Kirk, and now we get the big fight that we've been waiting for. It's not my favorite of Star Trek fights.
But you know what the suits of Paramount wanted at the end of Wrath of Khan was a big fist fight between Kirk and Khan.
Really?
Yes, that's right, John. They wanted Kirk and Khan to go at it hand to hand, just like, back in the good old days of the original series. But that's not what they got. And I think it actually is a pretty great structure that Kirk and Khan never see each other in person, just on the view screen, But now this is the fight that they didn't get in Wrath of Khan. Hand-to-hand fight with Kirk. When was the last time we saw Kirk in a hand-to-hand fight like this? Not including the moment when they beam down to the Genesis cave and Kirk, knocks David out with a couple of punches.
Maybe Whom Gods Destroy?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to the original. So, Turnabout Intruder or Yesterday's. Oh, I guess maybe the Savage Curtain. The Savage Curtain.
Oh, Savage Curtain, sure. Which John was our guest for.
Which John was our guest on. Coincidence?
So they fight. I hate that they give Kirk the Bruce Lee backflip, where Krug has his foot and he does the backflip. I just Kirk can't do the backflip. Come on. But it's fine. They're fighting. There's lava everywhere. There's fire everywhere. They're near an edge. The cliff collapses and Krug is hanging from the cliff. And Kirk says, "Give me your hand," because Kirk will always be compassionate at the end.
Yeah.
Even this guy who killed his son, he's still going to save his life.
This goes back to a character trait that was established from basically day one of the original series. Look at the way Kirk goes after the Romulans at the end of Balance of Terror. He says, "Standing by, there being survivors aboard." The way he's about to kill the Gorn, he's got the sharp crystal right about to go into his chest. He goes, "No, I won't kill you." And this guy just freaking killed the son. And he had to destroy the Enterprise and save the rest of the crew. And he says, "Give me your hand." That's Kirk.
Yep.
I mean, what is the first Kirk speech? Of all else, a god needs compassion. He argues for compassion from the very, very beginning, and that's what he's doing right here. And Krug's having none of it, grabs his leg instead, and Kirk starts kicking him in the face, and on the rhythm says,
"I have had enough of you!"
It's great. He's like, "Okay, that's it. No more Mr. Nice Guy."
I tried.
He falls. There's tons of fire everywhere. Kirk climbs out. He sees the sunrise coming over the eruptions. The ground is collapsing everywhere. Trees are bursting into flame. He makes it to Spock. And I love, by the way, that we see Spock in 1/4 profile. So he's mostly facing away.
Yeah.
But you can tell it's now Nimoy.
It's Nimoy. Yep. Yeah. It's a great shot because he's not facing up. You just see the side of his face, but you go, "Ooh, that's our Spock."
And even in this moment, Kirk was still the observer. He was still paying attention because he grabs that communicator and yells,
"More! Johnny 2!"
Which is exactly what Krug had yelled, and they get beamed up.
Yeah.
Bridge doors open. Kirk has the disruptor and just says, "Don't."
Yes. Don't.
He's the only person there. We got to break out of orbit.
You. Help us or die.
I do not deserve to live.
Fine, I'll kill you later.
That's after all that, there's still some room for some levity here.
Yep.
Yeah.
I like Scotty and Sulu trying to figure out how to fly the ship. And they're like, "Where's the damn antimatter inducer? This? No.
Well, this.
I love Shatner throwing up his hands like, guys.
Yeah, we gotta go.
Easy to figure out a Klingon ship.
We managed to fly the ship away, of course, just as the planet explodes. And in the death of the planet, we hear Kirk say,
"Goodbye, David."
You know what? When he said that this time, for some reason, I never had a reaction to that moment, but I did this time.
Yeah.
You know, like, goodbye, David. Like, I just was more taken with David's death and Kirk's reaction to it, not just on the bridge, but when he beamed down to the Genesis planet. Now he's saying goodbye, and you know, David's body was left behind.
Yep.
Because we're old men, guys. We're old men.
Yep. But Kirk's always going to move on. He's always going to keep going, you know?
Mr. Chekhov, take the prisoner below.
Aye, sir.
Wait! You said you would kill me.
I lied.
Oh, John Larroquette.
McCoy is looking down at Spock.
For God's sakes, talk to me. You stuck this damn thing in my head, remember? Remember? Now tell me what to do with it. Help me.
It's really great.
And then he just switches his approach and also lets down his guard. And the way that DeForest Kelley says,
I'm going to tell you something that I never thought I'd ever hear myself say. But it seems I've missed you. And I don't know if I could stand to lose you again.
what better line of dialogue? I'm going to say something I never thought I'd hear myself say. I've missed you. Like, does that sum up their relationship or what?
Yeah.
Scott, I don't know if you remember this. I think it was when we did All Our Yesterdays with Adam Nimoy as our guest.
Yep.
And we started talking about the fact that, these three guys, they're all really lonely people. Kirk is lonely, Spock is lonely, and McCoy is lonely. And they're all lonely in different ways. And this is my memory of the conversation, was that we said, well, who's the loneliest? And all three of us picked a different crew member of the Enterprise.
Oh, that's
who was the loneliest. And I think that I picked McCoy. And this moment really, he was there for Kirk when Kirk said, my God bones, what have I done?
Yeah.
There's never anyone there for McCoy. He's alone, and he's totally alone in this moment, you know?
Yep.
I don't know. He's been to that cantina a few times, man. I don't know.
That's true. That's definitely true.
I saw earlier.
Knew the way
usual.
We have arrived at Vulcan, and there is Sarek and Uhura.
Ambassador, they are on approach. They're requesting permission to land.
Permission granted. Tell Kirk we'll be ready.
We saw Vulcan in Star Trek The Motion Picture when Spock was, going for the Koh-i-Noor. But Vulcan didn't look anything like it did in Amok Time, which was, red planet or orange. But now someone got the memo, and the way that Vulcan is depicted in Search for Spock looks very much like, obviously it's a much, much bigger budget versus the Stage 10 on the Desilu lot where they shot the Cali Phi fight sequence in Amok Time. But it's still like, okay, that's more like it. And it was like, we're back at Vulcan. Like, Vulcan was, going to Vulcan was a big deal. I mean, it was such a big deal when they announced it that we were going to see Vulcan in the second season premiere episode of Amok Time. But now we're there. Sarek is there. And again, like we talked about before, he's very, very different from the way we saw him in Journey to Babel. I mean, he's like he really loves and cares about his son.
I love that we have a little bit where we say, Sulu, you're on manual. And he says, it's been a while because he hasn't had to land a ship in a while. And then, of course, he lands it perfectly.
Of course.
Yes.
And we hear a gong, and now we're in a temple. And you could just see all the references to Amok Time. And there is a woman there who is Talar.
Talar, the Vulcan High Priestess, played by Dame Judith Anderson, who was an Oscar nominee for supporting actress for 1940's Rebecca. She was also in The 10 Commandments and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And in the 1980s, she was on a soap opera called Santa Barbara.
Oh, yeah.
Also, when we first get out of the Klingon Bird of Prey, we see stairs. The Vulcan stairs were filmed at Occidental College, making this particular scene the only location shot of the entire movie. Otherwise, the entire film was filmed on the Paramount sound stages.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Sarek, the body of your son breathes still. What is your wish?
I ask for Fal Tor Pan, the refusion.
I love hearing, like, you've got the Pon Farr, you've got the Caliphie, now you've got the Fal Tor Pan. They're I mean, look, they were always evolving Vulcan culture, and hearing a new element of the Vulcan life in Search for Spock was cool, especially if you've been watching the original series over and over again.
Your request is not logical.
Forgive me, Tilar. My logic is uncertain where my son is concerned.
Great line.
Until this moment, it never occurred to me that there are two fathers and sons, both fathers who've lost their son, one who has a chance to get their son back in this movie. I never connected Kirk and David to Sarek and Spock before.
Great point.
Who is the keeper of the Katra?
I am McCoy, Leonard H., son of David.
Son of David. I love it.
And she basically says that this is really dangerous. And the camera pushes in on McCoy, and they say, you got to make the choice. And he's obviously scared. He swallows.
I choose the danger. Hell of a time to ask.
Again, the levity, it's like, phew.
Yeah. So they bring him forward. He lies down. There's gongs. She puts her hand on McCoy's head. She puts her hand on Spock. And I think, this is where an actor has to do hand acting. And I think she does a great job with all of this. She closes her eyes and bows her head. And then we see that all of the Vulcans, including Saavik, that some mystical thing passes through all of them. And you can feel them all unifying their forces together to do whatever this is that needs to be done.
Yeah, what you can also feel is the passage of time, because over the montage of cuts, you see the rest of the crew like kind of, taking a rest, sleeping a little bit, but Kirk is still standing, pacing, and he keeps looking back on the Vulcan priestess working on Spock and McCoy. He can't stop. He can't rest until he knows that both of his friends are going to be okay.
Yep. It's later. There's a wide shot of the altar from a distance. There's a gong. We see Kirk, and we see him looking at something, and we see a cloaked figure. And everyone gets up, and Kirk is going forward, and we see Sarek and McCoy says,
I'm all right, Jim.
So we know at least half of this has worked.
Right.
That McCoy is okay.
Kirk, I thank you. What you have done is...
What I have done, I had to do.
But at what cost? Your ship, your son.
If I hadn't tried, the cost would have been my soul.
Over these years, every time I would watch this film and he gets to that line, like he lost his son, he lost his ship. But I never thought of a better way to justify losing those two sacrifices than Kirk's response. The cost would have been my soul. Yeah. So it works. Like, okay, yep, okay, I got you.
You know what else? And you know how I said before that I was never really that sad with the Enterprise dying? And I just figured out two things about this. First of all, David was going to die anyway. And so was Saavik probably. If Kirk doesn't steal the Enterprise, that doesn't mean David lives.
Right.
Because the Klingons are there. The planet is still blowing up. Like they're at the best, they're prisoners of the Klingon Empire at the best. And probably David's being tortured to get the secrets of Genesis. So, Kirk's choice didn't kill David. And the Enterprise was already dead. Yeah. They were decommissioning it. It was going to the scrap heap. Right. It died rather than having a death in the scrap heap, it had a glorious death saving everyone's life.
Right, exactly.
You know?
It was a glorious death. Right.
Yeah.
It was a death worthy of the Klingons.
They turn and there's Spock walking forward, looking down. And I think the absence of Nimoy throughout this entire movie has been a great thing for this moment.
Yeah.
Because that's when you see him, it's like that's Spock. It's there.
And it's earned. It's earned.
Yeah.
And the way the reveal of Spock, because when you first see, he's got the robe on, he's got the hood over his head, you don't see his face.
Yep.
But so after McCoy walks away and after Kirk has the exchange with Saavik, then Spock walks by. He still has the robe on. The hood is still over his head, and then he pulls. I'm just realizing how well Nimoy directed his own scene here, because he puts the hood down, and then he slowly turns around. He doesn't turn around with the hood still up. It's like a slow reveal for him to turn around, and it's like it's Spock.
Yep.
And
yeah, it's great for the audience too, Scott, because we're like, oh no, he's gonna walk past him. He's not. We're gonna wait. Is it another movie? Maybe another scene? And then he stops. And you're like, oh yeah. And so the slow turn is so great, and the hood coming down. Yeah,
this is the moment of truth.
Yep.
In a weird way, I don't know why this comparison popped in my head, but it reminds me of Willy Wonka, where he first walks out with the limp, and you're like, "Oh, this guy," and then he does the somersault.
Yeah.
It's like we're heading towards this moment. He looks at Saavik, who looks down. At which point I wrote, "Because they had sex." He looks at Scotty, who smiles. A lovely moment with Uhura and Chekhov and Sulu. Then he walks right past McCoy, which I think is funny and sad and says a lot. And then to Kirk.
My father says that you have been my friend. You came back for me.
You would have done the same for me?
Why would you do this?
Because the needs of the one outweighed the needs of the many.
I think this line informed so much of our conversations for me on Enterprise Incidents, because what the biggest, there were many epiphanies I had on doing the show with you, Scott. And obviously one's about Kirk's character, one's about Spock's character, about logic versus emotion. But one of the biggest ones was the idea that what makes Star Trek great is that it's continually presenting opposites and saying they're both true. That Kirk has to come in and rush in and fix the planet, or Kirk is wrong to fix the planet. Like those, those things we can't. And what it does is it forces you to look at the same thing from lots of different perspectives in a way that's complex. And the clue to this, and what gave me the epiphany, is that we can hear the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one in Wrath of Khan, and say that is 100% true. That is as logical could possibly be. And then in this moment, we can hear the needs of the one sometime outweigh the needs of the many, and go, that's true too.
Yep.
Because they had to go save Spock, even though it meant risking more lives to save one life. And that the fact that both of these things can feel 100% logically true is one of the most important things about the Star Trek, the original series, and Star Trek at its best.
100% agree. And that is extremely profound and beautifully realized and observed, Steve. I mean, just breaking it down to its simplest form that way. And you're absolutely right. Both are true. And in the case of Search for Spock, the opposite being true rings so true, because that moment, this moment that we've come to where Kirk has flipped it and justified it, has been earned. It has been earned. And the payoff is extremely effective and emotional.
He thinks about it and he starts to walk away, and then he stops and he turns back and says,
I have been, and ever shall be, your friend.
And my note here, and this is definitely true, I wrote, and I'm crying.
Yep. It's amazing how much this movie needs its predecessor to work.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I never realized it really until this conversation, when you pointed out how this film has leaned onto the past organically, but particularly its predecessor. This movie is the opposite of its predecessor.
Yeah.
The predecessor, Wrath of Khan was action-packed, a lot of humor, also a lot of confidence. It just felt like a confident film. This movie feels like a memorial until its resurrection. And yet this film can't exist without its predecessor. And the impact of its predecessor, knowing what's going to come next, takes on a whole new meaning unto itself.
Well, this is a true sequel in the way they should be. You know what I mean? Like frequently the sequel is, how do we recapture and redo what we did in the first one that was so successful?
Yep.
That's not what this is. This is, we are continuing this story. And I love the moment when he says this, because Kirk didn't know if his friend was ever going to be back. I mean, he saved him, but is this going to be Spock?
Yes. Yes, Spock. The ship. Out of danger.
And you could feel like, oh, he's going back to the last moment of his life.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like that's where his brain is. He says,
You saved the ship. You saved us all. Don't you remember?
and he thinks, and again, now I'm going to get emotional again. And he thinks, and he processes it, and he walks forward, and there's this searching look from Shatner. And then Spock says,
Jim. Your name is Jim.
Could this movie end on a more poignant and effective and perfect note?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I've said it before, Kirk is my favorite of the captains, but Spock is the greatest character of all of Star Trek.
Yeah, he's absolutely. He's the most important character. He's the most important character in all of Star Trek. Everything that Star Trek represents is realized by Spock. And I love Kirk. Kirk's my guy. Totally. Kirk's my favorite, but Spock is the most important character in all of Star Trek.
Well, and like the thing that we did in doing the show was connecting all these things as if there was a continuity when there really wasn't. But like the evolution of Spock,
yes, it was.
The evolution of they didn't intend it that way, but the evolution of Spock is more perfect than it could have been had they planned it, because now he's died and come back and had his consciousness in McCoy, and some of that, I bet some McCoy got into Spock at this point, and the evolution. This is to the next person who we're going to see this really wise character that we're going to end up seeing in Star Trek VI, who comes back in Next Generation. Like this is another piece of that evolution.
You'll see his McCoyness in the fourth movie for sure. In certain moments, double dumbass kind of comes to mind. But, gentlemen, I appreciate your points of views.
Yeah.
I will never put anyone above Captain Kirk, but your betrayal of Captain Kirk is noted, and we will let you have Spock. But Captain Kirk is the most important character. I will go to my grave on that one, but I respect Spock is probably like 1A to Kirk's 1 in my opinion, because he is such an incredible character.
And then all of the crew, as a family does, surrounds the lost son and welcomes him back in. And
he has a smile. He has a slight smile. Am I wrong on this? Yeah.
No, I don't think you're wrong.
The button, the wrap, the bow on this, all of this is when Spock raises his eyebrow.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because everybody laughed and applauded in that theater on June 1st, 1984.
Yep. And then we see, and the adventure continues. And that is the end of Star Trek III, The Search for Spock.
That is the end of Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. John, I'm going to you. Like after 40 years and after this 2-part deep dive on Enterprise incidents with Scott and Steve and Johnny, how do you feel about Star Trek III, The Search for Spock on its 40th anniversary?
I will say this. I feel that I had an incredible time revisiting this film with you two, because the thing is, when you're singular and you're a Star Trek fan and you watch a movie, you can solely appreciate it from your point of view. But when you're talking with two other people who are just as in love with it as you are in different ways and in the same ways, and bring their points of views to it, it really elevates your appreciation for what they did with this movie. Do I still think it's a glorified episode of Star Trek at times? Yes. but overall, the emotional power of the film, I think, is undeniable. And all these years later, especially as I've gotten older as a human being and as a man, and you experience loss, and you experience things that rode with you for a long time and now are no longer a part of your life. There are elements of that this film absolutely touches on and captures perfectly. It was great to revisit the performances from everybody involved, and as I said, Christopher Lloyd to me gets better as the movie goes along and what he's doing. And I love this ending of this movie because, like all great sci-fi that rings true for us, it's about hope, and the end of this film is about hope, possibilities, right? And it's that line in Star Trek, right? We always like to say there are possibilities, and this film ends with that. And I loved all of it, and loved going down memory lane with this film with you guys, and coming away with it with a whole new perspective and a whole new appreciation for the film very much. So thank you, gentlemen, for having me on. This was an absolute blast.
Could not have taken this voyage without you. But Steve, I defer to you now. What is your take of Star Trek 3, especially after this conversation?
So when we started, I said that the whole, like, the even numbers are the good ones and the odd numbers the bad ones, that I rejected this because I think it's a good one. I now think it's an even better one. Look, Wrath of Khan is a truly great film in the sense of great films, of which I don't know that any of the other Star Trek films approach that sort of level for me. But I put this up with all the other. This is as good as any of the others, if not better. I'm not good at ranking things, but I haven't watched Star Trek 4 in a really long time, but I might like 3 better than 4. I mean, and I'm curious, and I don't know if maybe at some point in the future I might be watching it for some reason and really look at Star Trek 4. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I just totally love this movie. It is so satisfying to me. A, because we have the fun adventure stuff. B, because it totally makes me cry at multiple points. It services so many of the characters in the ensemble in ways they hadn't been serviced before. And then you also have the truly amazing acting, sad moment of Shatner when David is killed. The death of the Enterprise is a totally fitting death, which is something that is hard to do in movies. How often in a movie do you go like, that's the death you gave to that character? What did you, oh my God, like, so disappointing. That's not what this is with the death of the Enterprise and the reunion of the family coming back together after Spock's act. And it doesn't violate, like, sometimes when you bring a character back to life, it kind of feels like it violates their death and that doesn't feel that way at all. This feels really earned, and it solidifies this idea of the needs of the many do outweigh the needs of the few or the one, except when that's not true and the opposite is true. So I totally love this movie, and it's one I will watch many, many times again.
Well, I like you guys. I think that Star Trek 3, especially after this conversation, has gone way, way up in my estimation of it. I've always liked it a lot. I always sort of like put it in between 2 and 4, maybe not as good as either of those films. I still think it's as good as 2, but I think it might be as good as 4 for different reasons. I think Star Trek 4 works just as a movie for the masses. I mean, everybody loved that film. Yeah. People refer to it as the one with the whales, and I think that was a movie that even, non-Star Trek fans could enjoy. I think that Star Trek 2, it's like the Empire Strikes Back of Star Trek, in the sense that Wrath of Khan is the only Star Trek movie that works as a film outside of the Star Trek mythology. It's just a great movie, period. But that's what makes Star Trek 3 special. Because after this conversation, realizing how many nods there were, not just to Wrath of Khan, obviously, but to the original series. And Spock's name in the title, and the emotional payoff of see him pull back the hood and turn around and Jim, your name is Jim. This was a movie for the fans.
Yeah.
And 40 years later, it is still a movie for the fans. This is a love letter, not just to the original series, but the fans who love the original series. I think Star Trek 3, for Leonard Nimoy's first time behind the camera, I thought he did an excellent job. I thought he did a much better job than I ever really gave him credit for, because this was the first time that I really noticed and appreciated the many different shifts in tone. And I think there were a great many episodes from the original series that did that seamlessly, where the shift worked and the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. So the search for Spock for me was the search and the finding of a much greater appreciation for an otherwise underappreciated movie. And on its 40th anniversary, Star Trek III deserves to be admired and appreciated and embraced for the many ways that it actually is much better than history has ever really given credit for.
So that is what we think of Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can visit us on our Facebook page where we're still active. Just do a search for Enterprise Incidents. It's Enter Incidents on Twitter. You can subscribe to the show at all the podcast subscribing places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And we're also on YouTube where you can leave your comments. Please leave your reviews on Apple Podcasts. And also, if you've enjoyed this, maybe, and you like listening to the three of us, you could check out the three of us on my other podcast with my good friend John Rocha. We've been doing this for 8 years. That is the Cinephiles, CINE-FILES. And let's see if I can get them all. Scott Mance has joined us for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, A Hard Day's Night, Airplane, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and The Social Network.
Huh?
Did I miss one?
Blade Runner. Hello.
Blade Runner.
Hello.
Damn it! I was
maybe
doing
the most
so well.
iconic episode with Scott Vance.
So well, of course.
Blade Runner, because, gentlemen, Gaff is the Blade Runner.
Gaff is the Blade Runner.
Well, I got to say, Johnny, where else can people find you in addition to the Cinephiles?
Yeah, you can always find me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says, and my other podcast, the Hot Mic and the Geek Buddies. They're out there for you all to subscribe to. And once again, thank you, gentlemen, for letting me aboard the bridge for this particular episode. Thank you.
There is nobody else who deserves to be on this bridge other than you, Johnny Rocha, except for our good friend Ralph Sinetsky. And if Ralph is listening, we still do want to do another podcast of Enterprise Incidents with our great friend Ralph Sinetsky, who was 101 years old. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Movie Mance, and I get asked all the time by our Enterprisers who've been following us since we started doing this podcast back in March of 2021. And especially those who've discovered us along the way and even discovered Enterprise Incidents after we wrapped our epic deep dive of the original series and the animated series. So what I will say for now is Enterprise Incidents will return for a look at another Star Trek movie really, really soon. It might be on Enterprise Incidents. It might be on the Cinephiles. But Enterprise Incidents will return. And someday, very, very, very soon, I will have some great news to share about moving forward with deep dives of Star Trek: The Next Generation. In the meantime, like Steve said, please check out our Facebook page, Enterprise Incidents. We are still very active there. Be sure to share this 2-part special episode of Enterprise Incidents on Star Trek III on all of your social media platforms so more people can discover Enterprise Incidents and especially enjoy an epic deep dive of The Search for Spock on its 40th anniversary. So Enterprise Incidents will return. And until then, keep going boldly.